got to be able to be humble and vulnerable and strong. And I mean, all these characteristics, because in the end, no matter what you're trying to do, raise money from a VC or you're trying to raise funds, they're investing in your vision. They're investing in you.
Welcome to the I Own It podcast with Ben Reinberg.
All right, we are live from the Ben Reinberg I Own It studios in Laguna Beach today, and we are rolling out another incredible guest. I think everyone's going to enjoy this episode. We're going to talk about a topic that we don't get to talk about too much, and she is an expert, and she's coming on. Justine Metz, welcome to the Ben Reinberg I Own It show. It's so great to see you, and thank you for joining us today. Really appreciate your time.
Well, thank you, Ben, for having us. Important topic, and I'm happy to be able to chat about it.
All right, well, let's get right into it so everyone can know your expertise. Explain to everyone, what is approval voting and how is it you believe that you can create a more representative and effective government in our country?
Okay, well, I'm going to step back even before that, but I will absolutely answer your question. So what approval voting is a really simple method that, as you said, allows for there to be more representation of what people actually want in their candidates who become elected. And why, this is where I'll step back a second. Why do we think that's important? Well, I'm relatively new in this role, having joined the board of Center for Election Science and then stepping in as the lead at this point. And I come out of a packaged goods background and have worked some time on Wall Street. And I had a boss who once said to me, the answer is always with the customer. So we talk to our customers. Well, who are our customers? I mean, customers are donors. Customers are the electorate. Customers are our partners at the local market level who actually implement elections in states and so on and so forth. And what they universally would say is things that were animated. I mean, you'd see this body language that would be like, democracy is under siege, or, oh my God, the legislators are all, fill in the blank. They don't listen. And then I felt like we were kind of managing something like a little cerebrally. What's the issue here? Well, the issue is that the voting method we have today, which you get one choice, you go in, you vote for a person, and typically it's not the person that you actually really love. It's the person you think who can win. It's the person you're sort of like, all right, well, it's the one that's supported by the party that I prefer. Or we hear a lot of the times, well, I voted for the best of the worst. So probably some of these things you can resonate with and some of your listeners will resonate with. So what approval voting is simple, Simon. If there are 5 candidates for something, it could be in a primary. I live in Denver. We just had a mayoral election. There were 16 candidates for mayor. This is party agnostic. Does not matter what party you're in. And it's a really simple method whereby you basically vote for everybody you like. So what does that do? So in my case, I'll use the Denver mayoral election as an example. So I was only allowed to have one choice. I chose the person I wanted, and I knew she wasn't going to win. And it pained me. It agonized me. And guess what? She didn't win. But had I had the opportunity to vote for as many people as I liked on that ballot, I probably would have invited and voted for 3 or 4 people out of the 16. And basically the way the method works is it's simple, Simon. It's like whoever gets the most votes wins. So by definition, if there's an entire electorate a la the city of Denver who's now voting for 16 candidates, and basically you vote for as many people as you like, well, guess what? The person that most people liked the most is the winner. And so presumably that then, right, and we have data to show and evidence to show that when that happens, guess what? You have a person that's been elected who will act in your interest. You see legislation that gets passed that's akin to what's important to you. So today we call it plurality voting, is that method whereby you have one choice. We advocate for approval voting, which is like, well, why don't you just let everybody vote for whomever they like and then let the votes fall where they are and the chips fall wherever they are. And what we find is that that's far also more representative in all ways, not just in terms of policy. You also find more moderate candidates that fall because, again, it doesn't matter what party you're affiliated with. But if you wind up voting for people you like, again, it's agnostic. And what you find is more moderate candidates. You also find that the people who are elected are making better decisions in the interest of the people. You also find that they tend to be more diverse, different religious background, different racial backgrounds, different genders, and therefore more representative of the community.
Interesting. So Center for Election Science, your organizations, what issues do you guys focus on and what makes you different from other NGOs with similar causes?
Great. So what we focus on is singularly approval voting. However, because it is the simplest and it's the most representative. However, our scope and lens is to figure out how to scale this nationally, which is a formidable challenge. So the good news is CES has been around for 10 years. And so think of it almost as, we're called Center for Election Science, is not only have we, I call proven the case, the empirical case that approval voting is more representative. What we have also done is we have bodies of in-market, I call it data, that allow us to understand what the ground game and playbook should be in order to effectively advance approval voting at the local level. Because that is what voting is. I mean, every state determines, and every state has different laws about how we vote, which most of us know, I suspect. So where we are with CES is we were successful in advancing and getting approval voting accepted in Fargo, North Dakota a while ago. We've also been successful with getting approval voting accepted and being the method of voting in St. Louis, Missouri. We just participated in Seattle and tried the same. We did not succeed. And I think that's important because in building the ground game and building, I call it the playbook, the plug and play model that you can now go out to every state jurisdiction and say, this is the way to advance approval voting, the more representative method, is we have data to say what worked and what didn't work. And so that's what we're focusing to answer your question now. Our focus right now is how do we create the tools, the playbooks, the roadmap, the blueprint, whatever you want to call it, but for every state to then follow to advance, we call it this more democratic method of voting.
How do you influence change, though? Because there's so much diversity, so many different people with opinions and laws and people outside influences and money that pours into this throughout the country. How do you influence change, Justine? Because it's a real uphill battle with so many masters coming into this process and opinions and thoughts on how we should vote.
Yeah, it is the right question. And well, here's the beautiful thing. The beautiful thing is, again, this is completely nonpartisan, is there is a universal and a uniting dissatisfaction with the outcomes of our elections. Universal. So we don't like who gets elected. So this goes a little bit back to my packaged goods days in my career. Back to the customer, the answer is always with the customer is, if we can really plug into, this problem we're solving, what has to happen is you have to find the people who are the experts at the state level. So what we do is, in creating this playbook, roadmap, blueprint, whatever you want to call it, is we align with those in the market who have the connections to implement. So we think of the world, or we don't think of the world, we address the world as almost like binary, and it's not, right? But there are ballot initiative states where basically the public can go around the legislature and get something on the ballot. I live in Colorado. We are a ballot initiative state. New Jersey is not a ballot initiative.
Is California a ballot initiative state? It sounds like it.
You'd be surprised. But California is a ballot initiative state.
Okay.
So what we can do then is we will go in and we understand that if you're going to go into a ballot initiative state, okay, who are the people to align around? Who are the allies to align with? And then basically what you're doing is you're starting a process to engage the public and collect ballot signatures. You need a certain number based on what the legislature requires, so on and so forth. And then you can basically advocate for getting something on a ballot and you can let the public vote on it. So that requires a bunch of educating the public, worked around ballot initiative language, so on and so forth. So that's what we'll focus on in a ballot initiative state. In a non-ballot initiative state, you have to go through legislature. So again, every single state is different, right? But this is where we can align with attorneys general. We can align with, we have a partner in Utah, which is a ballot initiative state, but what they have done is get with all of the clerks, right? So this is where our experience with having worked over the last 10 years at the local, basically ground game level is allowing us to sort of, well, what does work? What doesn't work? What types of efforts need to be undertaken? What context do you need to make? And hands down, when we talk with we call them partners in each of these states or markets that we're going into, cities, counties, whatever the municipality might be, they say to us, look, what CES can give to us is the ground game, is the playbook. Tell us all the things we have to watch out for. Give us the templates around ballot initiative language. Give us this is what we're transitioning and pivoting to now at CES. Whereas in the past, we spent a lot of time collecting the data, analyzing the data, making the case for approval voting. Now we're pivoting towards, based largely on what our customers want and need, towards how do you scale this? How do we get this into every single state? And what does that roadmap and blueprint look like?
Well, how realistic do you think approval voting is? And at the municipal level, like where's been the most wins and traction? Yeah. What's the experience?
Yeah, so most of the wins and the traction, and there are a lot of notable people in the universities who have done, I call it the empirical studies on approval voting versus other types of methods. And most of it has been successful, I would call it not in public or state legislatures. Like they've been really successful in entities like a math or a science organization. Like it gets used sometimes in these broader entities. And so we have learned a lot from looking at them and say, so they voted for and they elected the president of their organization. Maybe it was in a chamber, maybe it was in an organization of some sort. But where approval voting has gotten the most traction has been in North Dakota, as mentioned, and in Missouri and St. Louis. And a lot of it has to do with how well organized that ground group is as well. So this is another part of, yes, it's like hitting single by single by single, but if we have a true plug and play model someday, which we should very soon, then basically our job at CES is to fan out, right? Fan out ballot initiative states. Here's who we address, non-ballot initiative states. And we just go in with the model and say, okay, how do we get this going? This has been the missing piece for us at CES so far. We have the proof, the evidence that approval voting is, let's just say, more democratic, for lack of a better term. But we haven't had, like I would call it, the systematic and the systemic model, right, that can be applied so that we can help our partners like scale quickly, get that onto the ballot quickly, or get it into the legislature quickly. And there's a lot of work that has to happen, as you know, once you go into the state or the city level. A lot of mobilizing has to happen, which is why a critical component part of this is partnership with those advocacy and or well-organized ground teams and groups at the local level.
See, I've read articles, Justine, over the years about just how much power the local municipal governments have versus the federal government. That usually gets all the attention. Do you agree with that? And does your influence, how you approach your organizational goals, are impacted by that?
Okay, first of all, that's our Constitution. right? I mean, that's the way we're built. We're built not as actually we call it the United States of America. We're actually built as, many, many, many entities if you include our territories and whatnot. So yes, I agree with that. But I think what I would say I've been positively encouraged by is this is not work. This is not starting from scratch, right? Like, I mean, yes, it's like one by one by one by one, and you just keep counting like, okay, 22, 23, like it's state by state by state or territory. Or I mean, in some instances, not all of North Dakota is approval voting. It's Fargo, North Dakota that's approval voting. I mean, you can just get. So this is why we've, the board and our team at CES have kind of thrown down the mantle to say, now we got to figure out how to scale it. We got the data, now let's go into and find these teams, and let's go into with these teams, bring them the model, which is what they're asking for. So yes, it's all local. The local municipalities have all the power. And that's another place, to your point, Ben, we've seen this used in boards of education, electing their boards and stuff like that. So, the contentious part is not, I would call it as much, right? Do we want democratic systems for voting, right? I mean, people just want better methods. They don't like the methods they have today. I would say what is hard, right? You don't have to convince people of that, right? But no matter what your party is. But what is hard is actually saying, well, how do you do that and then affect big outcome, right? And affect big change, versus small change. And this is the time to do it.
See, I also tend to believe that the changes in voting, Justine, in the voting rules have had a huge impact on politics, much more than many might think. But I believe voting rules do not generate enthusiasm the way other political issues do, like abortion, green policy, security, etc. Has that been your experience too? And how do you inspire enthusiasm for CES and your cause?
Yeah, so this is very interesting. One of the things I'm trying to do, and we're making progress on at CES, is take that, I call it that customer-centric, again, from my packaged goods days view, because we haven't, right? We sort of, and this is not a criticism to anything in the past, but I used to say this when I used to run large product management organizations as well. And one of the things I used to say to the product managers is like, we've totally fallen in love with our product, but we have no clue if the customer even wants it, right? So we spent a lot of time and we needed to, and we have amazing scientists who have done this, but we kind of fell in love with our product, approval voting. It's an excellent product, but we didn't really thread together like, well, how do you actually sell and scale the product? So we're bringing a little bit of this, I would call it mindset and discipline. So how you do it is you start at what's the problem we're solving for the customer, right? So if democracy, and I'm intentionally using big hand language because this is the way when I'm talking to, again, whether it's a donor or a partner or a voter, I mean, it is like you get this effusive, right? Like feedback of, democracy is under siege, or it doesn't matter. That's what I hear a lot. It doesn't matter. I mean, like my vote doesn't count, and it's like, well, no, your vote does count. So what I'm trying to get is us to ground in the problem we're solving and how approval voting solves the problem, and that will translate into a lot of how we design the playbook and how we design our communication, and then. One thing I learned is everything has to be grounded in a customer benefit, right? So we can talk all day long about approval voting, the whiz bang cool things about it, but if you don't hit the benefit for the customer, it will never matter. Yes. Right? So this is the kind of the insights that we're trying to get really deep into, right? Psychology and whatnot. But then as we go into a market, and part of that is communication and messaging and convincing the voter, like we actually understand that at an organic level and like almost like an anthropological level that we can really plug in. and motivate people to take action, because that's the issue. The issue is apathy, right, is our great enemy.
Absolutely. And so like throughout American history, Justine, people have regularly pronounced, this is the most important election ever, or things are falling apart, etc.
Right.
And the list goes on and on. And of course, there's plenty of room for improvement. There is in every society and culture. But I'm curious, in your opinion, how good or bad you think things are objectively are today for America?
Well, I think, again, this is one woman's opinion. It's nothing to do with CES, I would say.
Sure.
I think we have had such fast, disparately distributed wealth creation in this country. If you really think about it over the last 100 years, we're first of all, we're a baby. We're 325, we're 300-year-old country. And since basically, right, innovation technology came into play, a la the wars, we've had a massive amount of wealth creation in this country, concentrated in very few people's hands. And, it's not in the interest of the people who have the power, the control, and the wealth to either educate or empower the masses, the public. So I'm one of those people who thinks that the root of our challenges in America is this wealth or income inequality and disparity. Okay, so now go to your question, actually, which is how badly off do I think we are in America? I think we're at an inflection point. Mm-hmm. I think, and I do think some of the forces that are, pulling at us, and, some of these are political candidates, some of these are education system issues or whatever, are pulling at us, are putting us in a position to actually advocate and to stand up and to grab our power and to, as a voting public in the case of approval voting, but to actually protest. And I don't mean that in sort of like a march on the streets, unless folks want to march. I actually mean use your vote or use your voice or use your position or whatever to advocate for fairer things. And I don't know that I would say we're really bad off. I could certainly say we're not really great off right now, but I think things like what we're trying to do at CES are an important, one of the bricks, right, in the mortar in order to move towards a more fair and democratic America.
So fundraising, Justine, we call it raising equity in commercial real estate, is a big part of my career for the last 3 decades. And it's also a big part of what you do in your company at CES. I'm curious, do you enjoy fundraising? I know it's kind of new. You just got into the company, but what's the strategies for big donors, for grassroots that you have in the company? Yeah,
actually, I love this area, to be honest with you. And I've run other nonprofits. So this is kind of in my DNA. But in addition to my packaged goods background, I spent the last 15 years of my career in wealth management. And I worked with among the most wealthy people, quite frankly, in the world. And I share this view with my own philanthropy, which is, I think of it as an ROI. I don't give to a nonprofit unless I believe that my dollars are leading to impact. Mm-hmm. And then impact for me, again, coming out of private sector, needs to be measurable. Like I want accountability and I want metrics. And by the way, and I'm not alone. So when we talk with bigger philanthropists, when we talk with foundations that are notable, this is exactly what they want to. I mean, it's a very easy discussion to have. Now, it takes a very long time for the check to be written, because it is about, do they have faith in the leadership? And the leadership includes the board and the person. Do they believe that you're able to achieve the vision, the growth, the scale that you're speaking with them about? Do they think the thing that you're doing, not just the activities, but do they think approval voting, in our case at CES, will solve those big issues of democracies under siege? Like, I mean, there's a lot of if. So that's really where I spend a lot of my time, is with people who are fretting about America and democracy, and having these thoughtful, strategic conversations with them and saying, look, if we really aligned ourselves together, we can have big impact. And that's what they want. But it's then like sort of giving them the confidence that you can get there. So that has been, for me, you just have to play the long game, and then prove it along the way. And I love being in that situation, because having come out of private sector, that was exactly my career. Give me a goal, tell me how you're going to reward me, and boom, I'll hit it. And then raise the bar, and I'll go to the next goal. So this is a part that I actually really lean into, and I thoroughly enjoy talking with other people who care, who really care.
We have a lot of entrepreneurs and business folks out there that listen to us, as well as people from all over the world that love to understand about fundraising and raising equity. What are some of your tricks that you can share with our audience that you do to inspire people to invest?
Yeah.
Or donate, in your case at CES? What kind of advice you give people to inspire people to be able to raise equity or to be able to raise funds?
So the first thing you have got to have is a growth mindset and vision. Mm-hmm. You just have to. I mean, like, if you want to raise significant money, that's the first thing you have to be able to sit there. You have to be able to say, here's how we can affect a big change. Here's what big change will look like. But the second thing you have to have is you have to have the ability to translate that into actually phases of progress, right? This is one of the things I would say we have an opportunity at CES. I think we have lots of big vision, but then there was never really that layer down, right? To say, okay, well, how do we get there? So if you're trying to raise money, I think as an entrepreneur, you have to be able, and by the way, this would be true in the venture capital space, which you probably know well, right? I mean, I come out of that world as well. So it's like, you have got to have the business case, I call it, right? Here's my vision, 3 to 5 years. Here's my plan on how to get there. Here are the things here are the milestones I'm going to hit. By the way, hold me accountable for them, right? That is the way that we approach, and we are approaching, raising funds at CES. And then you have to have patience. I call it, when I was early in my career, I used to say I had patient impatience, right? Literally, I was just impatient. And I was like, I was forced to be patient, right? Because whatever my boss or the entity would force, now that I hope to be a little bit wiser and older right now, I say that I have impatient patience, right? Like, you just have got to be willing to have the conversations. You've got to be able to run the marathon. You've got to be able to be humble and vulnerable and strong. And I mean, all these characteristics, because in the end, no matter what you're trying to do, raise money from a VC or you're trying to raise funds for an NGO, they're investing in you, right? They're investing in your vision.
Yeah.
Your board is really important there too. So if you got a weak board, get rid of it. So yeah, that's what I would say I have learned, not just in being in the nonprofit space, but being in, my prior life, is that vision, growth mindset, practical operating plan, and the ability to run the marathon and have that, I call it impatient patience, to convince again, I call them investors versus donors, but to convince your investors that you are the right person as the leader, and your board is as well, and that the thing you're doing is the right thing that meets their needs.
It's so well said. And I'll even add on to that. Let me stack a little bit. It's persistence. It's showing up. I agree with you, being humble. It's that focus that you need every day, and just showing up in life and being present and controlling your emotions and all these things that we have to do. It's not easy raising equity or fundraising. Because it's a no business. No. Finally you get a yes. And it's exactly right. It's what you do, and it's the reporting. And it's so well said, because a lot of people, Justine, is they give up. They go through and they spend a day, a week, maybe a month, and it's such a failure type of situation where you get so many no's. But when you get yeses and then you could stack them and keep progressing, I encourage everyone out there that don't believe in the word can't or contractions. Keep pushing forward, fail forward if you have to, and you'll see great results. I'm sure you've seen that in raising equity, fundraising. I'm sure your clients that you were managing, we all go through the same experiences. Like everyone feels like, well, that person's wildly successful, so they must have it. No, we all go through similar experiences. We have to fail in order to push forward in life. And so I really appreciate you sharing that, because I think a lot of people lose sight of that. We are all human beings. We all bleed the same. It's what your mindset is, how bad you want it, and how far are you going to push yourself to get it.
Right. And I think if you have a product, I'm going to, transactionalize this whole thing. But if you have a product you believe in my case, it's approval voting.
Yep.
And you're solving a massive consumer need. Like in my case, it's like democracy's under siege. I mean, like, again, I'm an idiot. Okay, I'm just going to use myself. I'm an idiot if I can't figure out, but it's hard. It's not easy, right? Like I got to bridge that gap, because then you have the counter forces, right? And quite frankly, they're real, right? Like, oh, my vote doesn't matter. Oh, I'm not sure that this can happen because every state is different. Or, I mean, all these counter forces come into play. But that's, to your point, Ben, I agree with you. That's why you have to just kind of be thoughtful and run the manner. And you have to, the burden of proof for me is high, right? Let's go in. One of the things we're doing to make this more real is we're focusing now on creating true, what I call, again, packaged goods background test markets, true test markets, ballot initiative state, non-ballot initiative state. And I've been asked by the board, well, what's different from before? I'm like, well, what's different? Everything's different from before. Like now we actually we're going in one of the markets, I'll just use as an example, really important market, tends to lean conservative. Partners came to us and asked us to help because what they would really like is far more moderate candidates than they have been able to get. It is an alliance with us, the Chamber of Commerce, a very big foundation in the state. And what we are doing is all three entities have locked arms, and we're now literally step by step by step, both investing, researching, course correcting, so I'm flying out there in a couple of weeks to go sit with the head of the chamber. We're sort of talking about, okay, what comes next? So we're being very deliberate and intentional. Like this is the way you build the playbook. This is the way we get into and are able to prove what worked, what didn't work. We're testing everything along the way. So to me, burden of proof is a really important thing to take seriously when you're leading an organization where you are trying to raise a lot of money. Like you have got to be able to prove to people that what you're doing is working and can have impact.
Absolutely. I mean, one of our niches, our company, is we acquire and own and manage medical properties throughout the United States. And the burden of proof is the human body is never going out of style. So I agree with you. So Justine, we are all works in progress. And right. And you know that as well as I do. Can you share a recent example where you realized you had it wrong and did not own it fully? Because we asked this question because the name of the show is I Own It. It's owning every aspect of your life. Share an example for me.
Right. So here's the thing, and I want to be clear. Like, I haven't been here long enough to say this probably without somebody being offended. But you could probably tell I'm an honest person. But we just had a massive failure in Seattle. Massive. And I look at donor funding in terms of being a fiduciary steward of it. And that comes from my wealth management background. Mm-hmm. You probably can guess. Yep. But, if I'm going to go to a donor and say, you should give money to help us advance, scale, advocate for a more democratic form of voting, well, then when I go into a market, I got to feel there's a pretty high degree of confidence. Now, you never get 100% degree of confidence that you're going to succeed. There's always risk. We live life managing risk is my view. So we went into Seattle We did not have a well-organized ground game there. And that's one of the critical enablers for going into a market to advance approval voting. So, I mean, easy for me to say because I wasn't here from the beginning when that decision was made, but like we own it. We have to own it. We just have to say like, look, we massively failed in Seattle. Massively failed. Like I think we got 20% acceptance or voting for approval voting. That means 80% voted for something else, right? Like massive failure. Okay. But in owning it, right, that what I say is, look, shame on us if we don't, now we have the perfect use case of like what didn't work, right? So now we're like, and it's not just like saying, oh, well, we didn't have a well-ground, like well-organized. No, what about the well-organized ground game were we missing? Was it the people who were collecting the ballot signatures? Was it the fact we never went to the attorney general? Was it the fact that there were the way the ballot language was written made it this so that was unclear? Like what about this made it so that we were not successful in Seattle? So we own it, but now we own it and recognize it as valuable information. And then it's, to me, our responsibility to ensure that information gets out, right, to other markets, to other states to say, okay, well, here's all the things you want to do. But honestly, quite frankly, here's all the things you need to watch out for, right? Because if you don't do that, right, if you're only ever doing like, here's all the things you want to do, and you're not aware of the things that the counterforces, I think you're missing part of the equation. So
what's the best way to follow you and also follow the organization? Like how do people get involved? How do people know about Justine Metz and CES? Like what's the best way to engage with you?
So we do have so the best way right now is through Center for Election Science website. You can find it, just go into a Google search and do that. You'll see our content. Things like this are on there. You'll also see our research. And a lot of that research, again, we partner with academics and third parties who are very expert in this and get into the analytics and data analysis. So if you're that kind of person, you want the nitties and like, the 16-page regression analysis data, you can find that. Or you'll find, things like this, which are a little bit, I call it more 50,000 foot talk about, what we hear, what we're trying to do, how we're trying to progress. That's the best way to stay in touch with. We do have a limited social media presence, which is what we're working on now. And these are the kind of the things that are the tug between, well, if really you're trying to enable the local markets, to what degree are you reallocating or allocating resource, right, to the national awareness around CES? I'm not sure where I land on that continuum yet. We're still kind of debating that, figuring it out. But here's what I do know. When we go into the test markets, right, we will have the presence that's required and needed in order to make approval voting successful in that state.
All right. Well, we're going to wrap up with our 3 questions. Are you ready?
Mm-hmm.
Okay. Drink your water and buckle up.
I've got to okay, I'm ready. I'm ready now. Salivating a little bit.
All right, there we go. And by the way, I ask this to every woman, so don't be offended. How old are you?
56.
Okay. I love it. Same generation.
Yeah.
So you're this 56-year-old, intelligent, sophisticated, successful woman now living in Denver. And you can go back. If you're in Laguna Beach, we have a couch. And I would say, Justine, get on the couch, kick your feet up, close your eyes. Go back to when you were 16. You're a young lady. Mm-hmm. You're 56-year-old. You've been through a lot of experience, successful businesswoman. What could you share with yourself now, knowing with all your experience and knowledge to educate yourself? What would you tell your 16-year-old self if you go back?
I've gotten this question before in my university. Like I always say, recognize your privilege. Mm-hmm. Recognize your privilege, because when people recognize their privilege, they can do great things in the world. And I wish I had recognized my privilege earlier on in my life. Mm-hmm. Now I'm still young.
Right.
So I got another 52. I mean, I'm planning to live till 120. Just so you know, my retirement.
I'm doing 100. I'm going to do 150. That's my goal.
All right, you got 150. I only planned financially to 120, but I can revisit. But I'm living another 50 to 60 years. I wished when I was 16, I had recognized my privilege, because as I said, when you do, you just operate in the world way differently. I mean, to me, fairness and justice just is so much more forefront and center. You're I think as a kid, right, you're so self-absorbed, and so many Americans, I think, are in general. But if we just step back and say, like, why can't we just have a more fair world and a more fair America? Like, what is the threat to others having just as much as we have, those of us who are privileged? I can't find a threat here. Like, let's share. There's plenty to go around. So that's what I would say to my 16-year-old self is, get up off the couch, Justine, get out there and start doing things with your time that can really advance fairness and equity.
And I think part of that is gratitude. I believe a lot of people don't have what that means. If we could teach at a young age what gratitude really means and appreciating things, the little things in life, I see that a lot throughout my life and the people that I interact with. Is I think the number one issue people have in advancement is they don't understand the word gratitude. They look and they complain of, I came from this area, or I had this going. Well, you can create in life anything you want if you put your mindset to it. And the problem is people are set back because they're not grateful for the moment they have. And I see that a lot with some of the people I engage with. I feel that the biggest setback people have is when they can't take a step back and say, wow, I got something that's great. Now, how do I expand on it and create what I want in life? So what a great answer. I really appreciate that. So, Justine, it's our last day on earth together.
Yeah.
It's just me and you, God forbid. It's our last meal together. Your choice. What are we eating and what are we drinking?
Well, okay. Here you go. I'm a really healthy eater, but if it's our last day, and I'm happy. I'm sorry for you that you're stuck with me on your last day on this earth.
Well, we got to make the best of it. So go ahead.
Yeah. No, well, first of all, we're having a big old pizza. I mean, let's have it. Like, let's make it. I'm not a big meat eater, so it's my side is going to have lots of, but we're going to eat like the whole thing. Like, because, but we're definitely drinking and I'm talking a good dark craft beer.
Oh, wow.
Definitely. Either a porter or a stout, not an imperial because it's a little too boozy for me. So, yeah, we're definitely having a porter or stout together.
Is there an area in the country where you like pizza? Like, what's your favorite pizza?
Oh, New York. Come on, New York. I love it. You go into the Bronx, right? And the pizza is it's like 8 inches bigger than the box. So what they do, right, is they just jam it in the middle of the box and they fold over the sides. And you really have two pizzas in one big, large pizza box. Oh, yeah. Yeah, come on.
That sounds great.
The Bronx. So you and I are going to go to Mike's Pizza in the Bronx. Okay.
Oh, perfect. I love it. Love that. So in our studio, Justine, and you're more than welcome to come to Laguna Beach and come in studio next time. We have a grand piano. We have electric and acoustical guitars, as well as a drum set. If you could have someone walk through the black door in our studio and play us a song, it could be a band or musician. They could be living or deceased, your choice. Who's walking through the black door and what song are they playing us?
I can tell you this. Pat Benatar is walking through and she's singing Love is a Battlefield.
Oh, fantastic. Love that. Fantastic.
Have you ever seen Pat?
I've never seen her in concert, but we come from the same generation. I mean, she was a huge hit back in the 80s. And so love Pat Benatar. Well, and what people might not know about her, since you've given me the mic for a second, is on this. So Pat Benatar started actually as a gospel singer. Mm-hmm. Her lead guitarist is her husband, a guy named Neil Girardo. They have been together for I mean, Pat's in her 60s now, right? I mean, they've been together 50 something years. I mean, it's an amazing, if you want to call it rock and roll music, doesn't happen in the world story. And you can still see her. You can catch her at, some sort of festival or something like she to me is the real deal when it comes to music, and typically not described that way, but she's the real deal. All right. Well, Justine Metz, thank you so much for joining us today. What a privilege. And thank you for sharing us your views on elections and and voting. And we really appreciate the knowledge you drop. If you are interested in listening to more episodes of the Ben Reinberg I Own It show, feel free to kick that right-hand button and click subscribe. Feel free to click that like button as many times as possible. And as I say, let it go viral. And feel free to share your thoughts on our show as well. And if you're interested in following me, go to benreinberg.com. You can follow me on all social media platforms. And if you're interested in commercial real estate, feel free to log on to our company's website, alliancecgc.com. We are a leading investment firm in commercial real estate throughout the United States. And if you are interested in investing in our brand new fund, the Alliance Medical Property Fund, feel free to log on to our website. We'll show you how you can build wealth, you and your family, and create a legacy by investing passively in medical office properties throughout the United States. Justine Metz, thank you so much for joining us. What a pleasure to see you, and have a wonderful week. And good luck in all your fundraising and your efforts to change the United States and how we vote.
Thank you, Ben, for having me, and visit us at Center for Election Science, our website. And please, if you're interested, reach out. Happy to have a conversation. Also, there's a donate button. So, would love to hear from you.
Thank you for listening to the I Own It podcast with Ben Reinberg. To hear our past episodes and connect with Ben, visit benreinberg.com.